Okay, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Welcome to the March 29th, 2023 Board of Directors meeting for Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation here in the Rockwood Town Office, Richardson Room. We have a short agenda tonight. Our meeting is on YouTube. We have a hybrid option and we have the one-tap mobile option as well. Probably Allison would give somebody all of the coordinates to get to each one of those. First item on the agenda, public director comments. Please limit the public comment to a non-agenda items if we possibly can, and please remember to be respectful for people, to people who are speaking, and try not to have side conversations. Okay, is there anybody for a public and director comments? Allison?
Yeah, so a few of us, thank you to the board for being flexible with the meeting date change. It's rare that I would be the one wanting to not have a meeting because I love meeting about Midcoast Solid Waste. But it was a nice opportunity to be able to attend. A few of us attended an event at the high school that very much pertained to solid waste. It was put on by the Midcoast Climate and Energy Group, was it? Group, in conjunction with the hatchery program at the high school. So they've been studying basically the waste stream, and they gave a really quite impressive presentation about all the different landfills in Maine, and with a real focus on construction and demolition debris and where that's going. And they have been salvaging things from the waste stream. One of the examples that they gave was it was the Lincolnville sewer building. Is that what it that they demolished? And so they got word of that, and they helped with dismantling it, and then they've been using the wood to actually create other things. So it was a pretty impressive thing. They talked about deconstruction ordinances in other places. And basically just trying to figure out how, as a community, we can do a better job recycling the things that actually have value. We put so much effort into recycling things like 337 plastic, which we know have very little value, but then like a 2x4. So they presented on different models for that, and it was really, really well attended by the community. And I think probably at some future date they'll probably want. It was Danny Solomon who actually came and spoke to this board at one time. So he said that Midcoast had been really helpful, that giving them some statistics and things like that. They hadn't gotten as much help from some places. So anyway, that was a positive thing, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more about it.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you very much. Anybody else have anything to add to that, or maybe another topic?
Well, the Camden Public Works Department's taking apart the wharf on the public landing, and we actually brought the material over to him today to use to deconstruct.
Wow.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, though. It's not a revenue for the landfill. Yeah, but it's a good thing. You're not putting it in the landfill where it doesn't belong. He's able to reuse it and do something good with it. Might even come back and be a benefit to the facility at some point. We're looking at trying to work with them maybe to create a structure or something that we could expand, maybe the swap shop or something like that. Just something we were talking about.
Perfect. Anyone else? All set. I just would like to jump back and just make sure everybody knows we've got two members that aren't here tonight. Chair Falciani detained on a trip for a couple hours. He wasn't able to make it here. We also have Brian Powers out of our participating town, Hope not here, just so everybody knows. Okay, first item on the agenda out of the way. Second item, review and approval of the February 8th, 2023 meeting minutes. If I could have a motion on that.
I move that we approve the February 8th, 2023 meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the writing of the meeting minutes for February 8th? No questions, concerns, or anything? Okay. All those in favor? Seems like it passed with flying colors. Thank you very much. Next, agenda item, our facilities manager report. Dave, you want to take center stage?
I'm not gonna go through the whole report, but highlights are we rebuilt the baler, and that came out really well. That company did a very good job, really conscientious, good workers. Our employees did a really good job accommodating the fact that we were pretty much down for almost the whole week with the baler. So there was a lot of kind of moving things around, holding things and setting things up a little differently so that we were able to do the work on the baler. And then once the baler was fixed, they had to work a little extra hard to kind of get everything all baled up that got accumulated when the baler was down. So it all worked out really well. We didn't have any issues with that. That's really the only other thing is we already talked about. I went to that conference or the meeting about Danny Sullivan and the high school collecting materials, and that was pretty good. The kids are pretty fired up. I mean, one of the things I got out of it was it's like one of these programs where I asked some questions to the kids that were in it, and I said, "What kind of kids are in this program? Is it just one kind of group, or is it?" And they said it was kind of a good mixture of different people throughout the high school. And I asked them, "Well, I go, has this changed how you how you think about things and what you're going to do in the future with your career or anything?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, definitely." So it was good that it made a good impact on these kids, and I think it's giving them a little bit of practical experience that sometimes they lack in high school. He said just taking things apart. He says, so I thought that was a good thing, and I think it's a good program, and I'd like to see them somehow be able to kind of dovetail into some of the things that we want to do to expand the facility, or maybe not expand the facility, but maybe do some like improvements to the facility, like on the building, like the swap shop would be a good example. We've got that tiny little building. I mean, if you could think about if we were able to salvage enough material where they could build a bigger building, I mean, that'd be great, right? That'd be a great story to say, and it'd be a savings for the facility, and I think it's a positive thing. So we're talking about that, and no promises have been made, but I think it has some potential.
So there is a preliminary conversation going on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
I think it would be great if there is any more information on that, if it's brought to the board so that we know, maybe we could expand on that. I mean, that's pretty important.
I agree.
Really.
There'll be some discussion if we get to that point of like, where do we put it, and how
Absolutely.
big should it be? But we need to really look at ways of changing the way we think about the way the facilities run. And I'm not saying make big giant changes, but I'm talking from the perspective of you can't just always expect, fees are going to be increased to pay for the operation. You got to look at ways of maybe generating some revenue from things that we're just not taking advantage of at this point in time. And I think that we made one step towards that in this last budget. We're going to try and do something with the metal. We need to do something with the other things that are coming that get thrown away, that could be salvaged and possibly sold or diverted, or be, cost avoidances or anything of that nature. So we need to think about those things, I think, a little bit more to kind of keep the rates down as much as we can and not just keep on adding to the cost.
Sounds good. Josh?
This may be a basic question, but how often do doors, windows, 2x4s come in that end up in the landfill?
See, that's exactly that's like a untapped resource that, if you think about it, if you had a building that was big enough to some kind of open space building that you could bring these materials in, just not even put them in the landfill, right? Keep them out of landfill. So you're not putting them in the landfill. So you're reducing your operational costs in the landfill. That's one part of it. So that's your cost avoidance. And then if you can divert those materials to the building where other people that are trying to build things could go to and purchase, like go to the restore. You could, you don't have to charge a lot of money, but if someone was able to go in and buy an old window, which you see all the time, And a lot of them are just vinyl replacement windows people take out and they bring them in, they're perfectly fine. But for someone's camp or, you know, they pay $5 for that. So you made $5 and you save $5, you know, that's $10. It's just a lot of that. You start doing a lot of that, you know, you start changing the way the financials look on the facility. So I think that's the future. I think we need to start thinking a little bit about, you know, how do we raise revenue? Not so much, and then at the same time, reduce costs. So we just gotta keep on thinking of those things.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good for ongoing conversation for board meetings and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Good. Is there anything else, Dave, you want to touch on?
So we have Audrey Klein Leach and Patrick White Thompson. Yeah, and from Camden
National Wealth.
National Wealth Management, excuse me, and they did a great job presenting to Allison,
Finance Committee.
the Finance Committee, and we just wanted them to come in and present the same presentation or the modified version to the board, because there were some action items that needed to be taken, and there were appointments to representatives that can actually be communicating with Camden National. So I think that the old contacts were no longer in place.
Or we just need to
yeah.
make sure that you're still okay with it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think my part is pretty much done. We could move on to having them present, and I think Audrey will be able to explain, you know, what the board needs to decide and who they need to appoint for those points of contact.
Yeah, and if maybe just go through, some of the board wasn't here when we did the initial, you know, the investment policy and when we were deciding what to do with that. You know, the money that came back, the towns ended up keeping, you know, a portion of their money, but then we have, you know, all this money in the closure fund, trying to figure out a better way rather than just letting it sit in a bank account, but then, you know, not investing it in Bitcoin. So it took us a while to figure out, okay, what are we legally allowed to do? Who should we do it with? You know, so we went through that process, I don't know, a few years ago. And, but so maybe just sort of going over the brief, you know, history for everybody.
It would be helpful, Allison, because some of these folks are new to me. If you could just.
Oh, yeah.
folks
Oh,
go around and
absolutely. If we
introduce.
could-
Yeah.
Before we start, we'll go around, introduce ourselves,
That'd be great.
what town we're with, and then if
Yes.
you could just, you know, if you've got, so what have you got, a brief overview of what we need to do, or is it a big?
Yes.
Perfect,
But
okay.
Why don't we start, so I know. I
Absolutely,
Can
yeah.
address.
Why don't we start right over here, and we'll just go right this way.
So I'm Allison, I'm the treasurer, and I'm Camden Select Board member.
Yeah, Michael Brown, Selectman Town Hall.
My name's Kern Lake, I'm a select person from the town of Lakeville, vice chair of Midco Solid Waste Board of Directors.
Josh Garrison, select board member from Lincoln.
Eric Boucher, Select Board, Rockport.
Jim Annis, select board, Rockport.
Dave St. Laurent, manager.
And I'm Beth Potowski. I'm the administrative assistant at the office of Coastal Waste.
Perfect. And I'm Audrey Klein Leach, and I'm a senior vice president with the Wealth Management Group. My role is as a trust officer, so I'm your main point of contact.
And I am Patrick White Thompson. I am a senior portfolio manager. I handle all of the investment portion of the accounts. I'm based in Portland, Maine, so I'm up here for the evening and I get to spend the night in a hotel, so I'm happy.
Thanks for coming.
Wow.
Thank
And
you.
I'm right in the Camden office, right downtown. So if you guys want to come by and visit, I'm
Patrick, I didn't know we have to get you up here
So
before.
you're home and he's
Happy to do
away.
it. Happy to get out of the
Thank you.
office. You know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
don't cry. He's gonna get to go out to dinner. He's gonna come to the hotel.
Thank you for making the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's excellent. So a couple of years ago, as Allison said, you folks joined Camden National Wealth Management to invest some funds. And Patrick will go over the investments, but from a housekeeping perspective, we need to know whom we can speak with at Midco Solid Waste and who we are authorized to take instructions if funds need to be transferred from this account into the retail checking account so that you guys can pay bills or close the facility, whatever you need to do. So, what we currently have on file, so there are a couple of forms. One is we have an internet portal so that right now it's Jody Hansen is able to go in, and she can't change anything, but she can see the assets that are in the account. And so I don't know if she is still is that still the correct person?
She's the bookkeeper, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be still the correct person.
Yes, I would think so. Are these items that needed to be voted on, considered and voted on?
Well, the first one is going back to who we're allowed to speak with. There's a corporate authorization resolution. So hopefully you folks will take a vote tonight in terms of who we can speak with. So, and each organization is a little bit different. So we would need the name and title of the person and get their signature tonight. And then if there are any limitations on what they're authorized to do. So some organizations will say, you know, if there's a request of X number of dollars or higher, you need to hear from 2 people and get 2 signatures. Some organizations don't have that. That would be considered a limitation, and we would need to know that. Some organizations have no limitations. So that, again, that's something you folks need to decide.
How were we designated previous to you coming tonight?
The way you were.
And I'm sorry that I don't know this.
No, it was.
Like shared.
It's perfectly fine. Jody Hansen
Yes, so it was Jody.
and Marlene Libby.
People that you can speak with, but who cannot make changes
So
or
they're people who we can take
direction.
instruction from.
Okay.
Right, and then Audra in Camden. Because again, the idea was they would be getting instructions from the board, and these would be, that information would be funneled to us through these people. And if those aren't the correct people, we need to update the form.
Who is that second person?
Yeah, so this is why we wanted to bring it to the board, like
Marlene's,
Marlene is the assistant finance director in Camden, so.
Okay. So this is people who actually have access to look at this.
And we can take instruction from them.
And
So
take it. Okay,
So
yep.
if they call and tell us to transfer $40,000 into the retail checking account, we say, oh, it's Jody or it's Audra. Yep.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
And so if you're still okay with us taking instruction from them, because you as a board have spoken through these people, then we're fine. If any of those people have changed, or if you want to be more boots on the ground, so to speak, we can change the form.
does it matter to know the value of this asset?
Yeah, why don't, maybe if you wanted to go through, I mean, it's our landfill closure fund, so essentially, when we did this, there were no plans to take anything out ever. It was basically, the only thing that would be done is everything that the town budgets the corporation budgets every year, $100,000 is being transferred in, and it was at a time, I believe, when we were having some management transition stuff. So I think they just went, I honestly don't remember.
That's an accurate assessment.
Yeah, so, which we're often in transition, it seems, so. I was asking if whether or not in the finance committee meeting, I asked if we could designate it as a position rather than theoretically you want the facility manager, whoever that is, maybe to be able to do this because the facility manager is the one that's supposed to answer to the board. The board, votes on things, and then the manager carries it out. They said it has to be an actual, person. So, it probably makes sense to have this generally like as part of our annual housekeeping that we would just do automatically every year, like we do, maybe like when we vote on chair and vice chair and all of that stuff. Because there's probably no escaping the fact that there is gonna be some change. I mean, to me, there would be no situation that I can think of right now where Audra would be the person that would be doing that. It's not that I think that it's gonna be I'm worried that she's gonna do something, but does that really make sense?
So very good point. Instead of having Audra in there, for better continuity, should we have either the manager or the chair of the board?
Or it could be both,
What's that?
or it could be both.
Yeah, it can be both.
Yeah, you know, then you have like a check and balance.
Yeah. So it would actually
Why don't
be,
we have the bookkeeper that knows what's needed for money and everything else?
Yeah, the treasurer, right?
We're only
Well,
talking about
right.
one account,
This is the related to the wealth management.
just the,
Yeah.
and none of our other reserves are in there, right? No.
I mean, what we do
So
for
right-
the warrants. is
Right
we
now,
have
what we
the
do,
manager and another board member, either.
there's actually, yeah, possibly 3 signatures.
Mhm.
Bob is not usually
But he could be,
he
it's
could
just.
be, he's on it, but he doesn't like to do it. So, but the thing is, so Jody runs all of our reserve accounts, so she has to have the ability, as they were saying, to be able to move funds when needed. I don't think this one gets moved very often, but she does do this on a regular basis, I think, with our checking if we need to. She also gets all of our statements and reconciles all of the accounts. So she keeps, the records for all of these accounts. I don't see them. I literally take the closed envelope, stamp the date on it, and I give it to Jody. And then you guys, it's supposed to be a little bit better reported in our things that we haven't gotten there yet. But also Jody, I think for convenience, but people here may not know, Marlene ran our books for a long time, and she signs all of our, she's like the person that signs the checks. So I think she's like bonded to sign all the checks and stuff. So I think that was another reason why Marlene was picked initially. And probably Otter just for convenience. At the time, I think it was
I think maybe the executive committee was running things.
yeah, so I don't think it was like a
First two, so it sounds like Jody and Marlene are really very important to have on that list.
I think
At
that's.
least in my
part of
mind,
the-
is
part of the
there a-
contract we have.
Is there a reason for someone else? I mean, we've got Audra, who
That's up to you
by
guys.
default, Audra is, well, she's right there with them.
it's convenient,
But
yeah.
yeah, that's what I mean by default.
Dave only has access to one account. The manager has access to one of our accounts. And that was done about 4 or 5 years ago, I think. But, and other than that, I think they all have to be signed off on.
I think from my opinion would be is that it's a lot of money. And I think the board communicates with the manager, who then I think would communicate with Marlene and Jody. I think that's how it should be. You have enough people that are in the chain of command where there isn't anything like that.
That's what I was thinking. If the
Exactly.
man had, at least you could.
I can communicate it, report things that are happening back and forth. It isn't the
Yeah.
board going to someone in Camden that works in the finance department to find out
Right.
what's going on.
Because we
Well, I
don't,
don't think you should have anybody on the board anyway.
you don't get to
What's
see.
that?
I don't think you should have anybody on the board anyway.
You don't think anybody on the board should be involved in?
Well, no, because
We go by
when
minutes.
they're gonna be gone in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's another.
Every-
way to
we
look
have
at
a
it.
flip-flop.
Sure, Joe.
So
Okay, so
we're
that-
elected, so, no.
Jody wants to see the minutes
Okay.
before she changes.
Right, Jody's trained to do that, she knows what she needs
Right.
in order to be able to move
Yep.
money, so, and that's kind of part of our contract with Camden, that there's like a responsibility there.
So,
But the manager, it does seem odd that, why would the Camden Town manager have this ability, but the facility manager,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean. I just-
So that makes perfect sense. So for what we've got here is we've got a recommendation from the site manager, or from Midco Solid Waste, to make a change, and I'm looking for any other opinions here. We've heard from you.
Yeah,
Eric.
well, as it stands, I would agree, because
Yeah,
being a bookkeeper accountant that does this all the time, if I don't have access to some of my clients' bank accounts, it freaks me out because I can't monitor things. So that's gotta stay. But having Audra on there, I think is not the correct positioning,
Okay.
because she's only a committee member at best. So it should be a facility manager at the time, yeah.
I agree.
okay, and you agree with that? You good with that? So I think we pen that as a change, and am I right? We're gonna have to vote on these changes at the end of this presentation. Is that okay?
Yep, so we're gonna keep Jody, we're gonna keep Marlene, and we are adding David
And subtracting Audrey.
and subtracting Audrey, correct? All right.
Okay.
And then I can get your signature tonight, and then I can get Jody's and.
So, again, this is an account of public funds. They've been set aside for the landfill closure. So because they are public funds, they're not private funds, they're not a bequest from an individual for the betterment of these towns. We do require a very specific set of rules on how we can manage this account. So we have to invest in very high quality fixed income, whether it's A-rated or better corporate bonds, treasuries or agencies. We don't have the flexibility to invest in stocks. So this conversation is going to be based primarily on bonds, which normally is a very dismal and boring set of topics. But over the past year or so, we've seen a lot of activity in this particular part of the markets. And that really has been an extension of what we've gone through with the pandemic, where we had the Federal Reserve lowering rates to zero. We went into a deep recession. It was a short recession, but going into that recession, we had a lot of stimulus in order to, inject money into the economy to get things going, over $4 trillion worth. And that had a powerful effect. So the markets came roaring back. The economy went basically from being completely shuttered to recovering. And so what we saw as a result was we saw tremendous shortages for goods, tremendous shortages for labor, and that resulted in inflation. We also saw a lot of dollars chasing fewer goods. So the combination of the two resulted in this sort of spiral of inflation, where we saw inflation getting close to double digits as the economy recovered. So what the Fed has been doing is aggressively raising interest rates as a way to rein in the inflation by tightening financial conditions. So, and I'll turn to I'll start with page 1. So the Fed aggressively raised interest rates. And so we saw that effect really having a strong effect on the stock market, but also the bond market. So typically when we get into a situation where stocks get into trouble, bonds usually bail out a portfolio because there is a flight to safety. There's a very standard maturity there, and they tend to have higher quality than what you find in the stock market as an investment. Unfortunately, because we had such a large increase in interest rates off of basically zero, we had a very strong negative effect in bond market. So the bond market was down, the aggregate bond market was down 13% last year. And that's actually the worst bond market return in history. I was mentioning to the finance committee that you'd actually have to go back to 1786 to find a similar bond return, a negative bond return, when international agencies were trying to evaluate the creditworthiness of a young US republic. So that's really the conditions that we've had to deal with. The good news is that going forward, rates are much higher. So when we started this account, we were buying bonds that were yielding 0.6% because that was really all that was available. We had a portion in corporate bonds, we had a portion in treasuries, portion in agencies to try to develop as much return as we could in basically a zero return environment. Now we're looking at cash. Cash alone is currently yielding 4.62%. So just the cash on this account is yielding 4.62%. So going forward, that creates a better opportunity set for us to invest these proceeds and have some kind of positive return. The other thing, I'll turn to page 6, and you can just kind of see this, as I was mentioning, this is the yield curve. So these are the interest rates at each different maturity. You have 3-month, 1 year, all the way to 30-year. And you can see that as of December 31st of 2021, interest rates were at 0. And as of the end of last month, the front end of the interest rate curve has gone all the way up to 5%. So what that means for us going forward is we're going to continue to use a bond ladder. So what we are doing is we are staggering the maturities of the bonds in this portfolio so that we can have the flexibility to always have a certain portion of the bonds maturing so we can continue to reinvest them at higher rates. We think rates will probably go down gradually from here. And so that's the big sticking point that we talked about is, do we invest in the front end of the yield curve because it's yielding the highest amount? Or do we use this bond ladder to stagger those investments? Because if we get a recession in a year, yields are probably going to go down. And if all of our investments are just 1 year out, when we reinvest, the yields are going to be lower. So we want to take advantage of as much of the yield curve currently as we can, knowing that there is the potential there for a recession in 1 to 2 years, which may negatively affect the returns that we're getting on the bonds. And there's a depiction of that on page 13. So this is a depiction of the way the bonds are spread out from this year to 2028. And you can see that within the next 2 years, in 2023, there's $290,000 coming due. In 2024, there's $380,000 coming due. And what we'll do with those proceeds is we'll just continue to migrate them further out on the yield curve. One of the things we're looking at as far as composition of the bonds, and this was something we talked about with the finance committee, is going forward, we may use some of those proceeds to invest in CDs that are federally or FDIC insured. So $100,000 CDs that carry a higher rate than their treasury counterpart, because there is the added incentive for banks to create more deposits. And so that's kind of what you've been seeing with this whole banking crisis, is that there's a deposit issue where banks are low on deposits or banks have concentrations of deposits with just a few clients. So if you have clients taking deposits out, it creates a vulnerability for the bank. So this is a moment where banks are willing to pay 1.5% above what treasuries will yield, but it's FDIC insured. And if the bank does go under, the deposits are insured by the FDIC and they're reconstituted to their borrower within just a couple of days. So that's one way that we might be able to increase some of the interest rates on this overall portfolio. Another way is we're looking at credit. This is not the right time to look at credit. When I talk about credit, I'm talking about corporate bonds. Spreads are still tight, which means the premium that you get for borrow or lending money to say 3M versus the US government. You're not getting a lot of premium to lend to a corporation as opposed to the government at this stage. But eventually that will change. And that usually tends to lead recessions. So investing in high quality corporations going into a recession, that's usually where you see the spreads widen the most. So as we see a recession develop, we may start to migrate some proceeds into very high rated corporate bonds in order to maintain some additional returns. Again, these bonds all mature at a specific time, so you do get your money back. The issue with bonds is that between where you buy them and where they mature, the value does fluctuate based on interest rates, because you're always able to sell your bond in the secondary market. And so the markets are constantly re-rating the value of your bond based on where interest rates are now. If you hold bonds to maturity, then you end up getting your money back. The reason I say that is because a lot of the losses that you're seeing in this account are transitory in nature. They're paper losses. They're only realized if we sell the bonds. If we hold the bonds to maturity, we get our value, the value back. And to highlight that, I'm going to turn to page 15. Do you guys have any questions so far?
Why is the air conditioning, the air conditioning was too loud? Am I the only one?
My hands are cold.
Incredibly cold.
Set it at 60, ain't that bump it up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm not cold, so. Good to speak up. It was there.
Do you guys have any questions at this point, or?
I mean, are you very familiar with bonds or not really, or?
So basically, when I was listening to all this before, I was like, okay, so when you got to the end, it seemed like, okay, there's really no risk as long as we're not, I mean, not no risk, but if we don't try to sell them early, then all of this fluctuating stuff is a little bit meaningless to us, right?
That is correct.
Right.
That's
So that-
correct.
Because we are required to value each one of our assets on a day-to-day basis. What would somebody be willing to pay you for this asset? And as Patrick said, if if bonds are now going for 4% and 5%, something that we bought that's maybe 1% doesn't look quite as attractive. So necessarily the market sort of says, well, this one isn't worth as much. But if you hold it until maturity, you're still collecting that 1% during the life of the bond, and you get, say you bought it for $10,000, you get that $10,000 back as well.
It's a discounting mechanism because the payment is fixed. So if you have a bond that pays 1% and rates are at 4%, the way that bond becomes 4% is by having the principal go down in value. So that 1% ends up becoming 4% because the principal is, instead of being 10,000, it's now 9,000. But if you hold that bond to maturity, you get your 10,000 back. So I'll highlight that on this page, page 15.
The other part was where you see gains in the initial investment. You were talking about taking those gains and reinvesting those in a different mechanism, right? Were you saying that, or?
If the bond was bought at discount.
If the bond was bought at if the bond was bought at a discount, then you would see some gains by having the bond mature back to par.
Right, but then you were talking about taking some of those gains and investing them into something different, a different type of fund, right? Like
Buying,
And that's when you were talking about you, depending on what my.
Buying CDs.
Corporates.
Oh, yeah. Yes, but that's all based on the maturity mechanism. So as far as this portfolio goes, and if I said that, or I think maybe I said something that was misunderstood, but as far as this portfolio goes, this is a buy and hold portfolio. So when these come due at maturity, which they will every year as it's staggered, then we make the decision at that point based on what the economic conditions are, whether we want to go into agencies, whether we want to go into treasuries, whether we want to go into corporates. We've been going into treasuries mostly because that's where the majority of the yield pickup has taken place. But to my earlier point, there are times when corporate bonds yield a more attractive rate where you're being compensated for the risk that you're willing to take to lend money to Visa or 3M. So that's kind of where that rolling decision-making process goes. But as far as selling things intra-maturity, that's not something that we're probably going to do with this portfolio.
So who makes the decision on what kind of strategy you use to do this?
That's a great question. So we have a committee structure. We have an investment committee, which is our overriding committee. Everything goes up from the subcommittee level to the investment committee level. So I am a member of the investment committee. And then we have a series of subcommittees. We have a stock committee, we have a fund committee, and we have a fixed income committee. So I'm the chairman of the fixed income committee. So we meet every other week to discuss what we're seeing in the markets, whether we want to add credit to our portfolio, to our strategy, whether we want to add treasuries, where we think recessions are going to happen, how that might affect a bond ladder. All of those things are discussed in committee. We have currently 5 portfolio managers that we work with that are on these various committees, and then all of the decisions at the subcommittee level go up to the investment committee.
So, but this account specifically, I mean, because I don't work in that environment, but I mean, at the committee level, is like an individual account like this discussed, or is it more of a bundle? of
It
accounts
is.
like this?
Yeah, so at the investment committee level, we regularly look at all accounts, and also these accounts are reviewed at a minimum for audit purposes every year. So, you know, when the audit comes up, we want to make sure that we don't have too much cash, that the account is being managed to the investment policy statement that we put together for you and for any of our clients. And then we also have a regular monitoring system to make sure, again, that if we have a maturity that matures in here, that it's not going to sit in cash for too long if that's not what we want. You know, in some cases, we're willing to hold a little bit more cash because cash has been yielding so much the front end of the yield curve. The thing with cash is it's variable, so it's not always going to be high. Whereas if you buy a bond, it's a fixed return. But these decisions are all made through the investment committee process, which is a weekly meeting.
Who though initially gave the kind of the overview of how they wanted the money to be managed? Was it?
Well, it's you guys, it's you.
That's kind of what I was
Yeah, and
wondering.
every client comes with a different set of circumstances.
Sure.
So we craft an investment policy statement. You know, your investment policy statement is based on the Maine municipal statutes and based on the duration of what you guys are trying to accomplish. So, you know, when we started this account, it was a 5-year process. I don't know, 5 to 7 years, and then the next year we met, it was 5 to 7 years, and the next year. So,
We asked
but-
Allison, she said, oh, probably 5 to 7.
It actually went up, didn't it, this year?
Yeah, it's 14.
14, so.
5 to 14.
okay, 5 to 14. So that's one of the factors that we take into account.
Right.
We don't want to go 14 years out on the yield curve at this point. I mean, that's just kind of a murky area just based on where rates are and stuff. But ideally, we're managing this account to a specific time frame. So when we had originally put this together, that 5 to 7 year time frame helped to inform us how far out we wanted to go with our maturity, so that all the maturities would be coming due at that point. For other people, there's all kinds of different, you know, constraints. People come to us and they say, I don't want to buy any gun stocks. People come to us with a huge position in one stock that has a very low cost basis and it's a taxable account. So we have to manage around that. You know, there's all kinds of different things that we sit down with the client to formulate how we go about managing their individual account. And then once we've done that, once the investment policy has been signed, then we have our marching orders and then we manage it according to that asset allocation process. And then that's when we're monitoring it regularly through the committees.
So I promise I won't ask any.
No, these are great questions.
The one other question I have is when do you, so now we've talked about, it was 5 to 7 years, 5 to 7 years. Now we're saying, okay, it could be 14 years. So when is the trigger to have the committee or the board reevaluate the policy on how to invest?
And that's a decision you folks.
So, I mean, I really think that I'm not a financial wizard of any kind, but I know that when you start stretching out the time, your strategy might need to change. And that might be something you need to look at to make sure that you're getting as much yield on the investment as you can for the.
I think, if I remember the whole clause with the closing, you know, because it was supposed to be for the closing
Right.
costs,
Right.
and we keep extending that out.
Well, but at the same time, because that closure, so let's say we start aggressively managing the facility in a way that we start reducing stuff going into the landfill by diverting materials. Now we're lengthening the landfill lifespan,
Right.
okay, and putting less in there. So we're kind of kicking the can down the road of closure, which the closure cost could potentially go up. So you want your investment or your closure probably to try and keep pace with that.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
you know, that's
but
the.
That's a very good point, but you also have to take into account the Maine municipal.
Sure.
And so
Right.
that's kind of,
Yeah.
you know, as Patrick was saying, every client has a constraint, and kind of your constraint is what?
Maine Municipal's policy
So,
on.
so the only thing we can invest in is bonds, whereas if you were a client came to us and said, okay, we've got a 14 to 20 year time window. In order to keep up with inflation and make sure things are growing, we would probably introduce some form of equity. We would have a stock allocation stocks.
Is there a point where you can deviate from the Maine Municipal, what are we calling it, the Maine Municipal guidelines of, so to speak, in order to maximize the investment to keep up with closure costs, if the closure costs are being stretched out?
That would be a question for an attorney, but I would say probably not.
And the
If it's
reason,
entirely,
it's-
if we're not a taxpayer, when we went over this quite a bit before, because one of the things was, we had a few other firms and some of them gave very murky answers on like the legality of all of this, and so it caused us to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and we ultimately settled on Camden National Wealth Management because we felt the most comfortable, I think, with them knowing that we definitely weren't going to break any laws. And we didn't really want to be telling our investment company what was legal and what was not. That was too much of a burden for us. And then Paul Gibbons got involved, but that wasn't really his area of expertise. So,
Yeah.
what one thing that did come out of that was that if we weren't, because we are a quasi-municipal corporation and the funds that we have in there are reasonably considered to be taxpayer funds, that's why it kicks into that. If we got into a situation where we, truly made ourselves like not run by the municipalities, like a full nonprofit corporation that was like a 501c3, then we could do something different. But since
Yeah,
we're,
Or somebody left you a bequest.
Exactly, it's
oh,
For,
right, like the trust
Yeah.
funds, right? If we got a
right, so
donation.
if somebody left you,
$1 million.
that was environmental with a penchant for the,
Mhm.
facility, then you could. So it's just because where the money originates from, is from
Right,
taxpayers,
exactly.
you have to be more conservative.
And we have accounts like that for education, things of that nature where people have left bequests, and that gives us the ability, because those are private funds and not public funds. It's just that statute was put into place to protect public funds from any undue speculation.
Well, I agree with all of that, but, and I understand what you're saying, but what about the revenue generated from the funds? That to me would be maybe potentially different. No? Okay.
I mean, the Camden, like we have the Camden Trust Funds that were like that with donations. Or maybe if we were to, one thing that had been said to us before is if we established like a complete enterprise fund for a portion of our operations, that might be a possibility.
Yeah, there are definitely other options you could do, but they would be separate from these funds.
So.
Ran a for-profit swap shop.
So
Yeah.
is there a way to, so our facility is potentially is partially funded by taxpayers and partially funded by fees, okay? So is there a way that we could start investing make a line item and potentially split the allocation of what we put in each year? And one part would be what we would say would be coming from taxpayers, and the second part would be coming from fees, which would give us more latitude to do what we maybe have more aggressive investment.
That
with
sounds very rational, and I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But that's an accounting question, and I don't think it would be, he's shaking his head vehemently, no.
I'm just trying to think of a way we can kind of make.
Yeah, but it's,
You couldn't prove that
right,
this dollar was not given by the town of Rockport.
Oh, I see.
That this dollar came from the funds, and because you're mixing the funds together as revenue, there's no way that would pass an audit. It would totally slap you down.
that's why some of
Well,
Allison's ideas.
I think if you have solid municipal, let's say we have municipal solid waste and we're charging bag fees, let's say.
Yeah, I know.
But the interlocal agreement
But-
specifies that is meant to offset the taxpayer
Yeah.
input, so, and like fulfill our obligations
I
to the
don't-
DEP. But you're right that, so this is an important for thing. We adopted a conservative approach. And there were there may be attorneys out there even and other financial organizations who would be willing and eager to make an argument like
Yeah.
that and maybe to go for it. And we kind of, what we decided as a board was that we just didn't want to get into any of that. We wanted to know that it was yielding a little more than if it just sat there. And, but some disagreement about this did cause the towns like Camden and Rockport, well, all the 4 towns have some of these funds held themselves and invest possibly under a different investment policy through their towns. So there was like all this, if you really wanted to chat about it, you could like call up Deb Hall and Bob.
The only reason I'm saying it is the MRC was in this position, I believe, some years ago. And they had funds where they made investment with some of the funds that they had. And it yielded huge gains and it put them it carried them through into some real tough times. And I'm not saying that's what we could do here, but it would be nice that, you know, if you couldn't make a little bit more money on
Well,
investment.
But they're not.
Okay, well, I think
Right,
this
it's a
deserves,
different,
structure.
it's a different animal. We're
Yeah.
quasi municipal, so we
Yeah.
are stuck to the rules under a municipality.
Mhm.
I think this deserves more in-depth
Yeah.
conversation between the committees, or something like that, if we continue on with the presentation. It's all good information. It's good questions, Dave, and I know.
I just
said
want
I'm
to see
not
you
gonna
guys get a
ask
little bit
any
more money in the end.
But
No,
I
I
just
don't
understood. But
Yeah, I don't want you to go to jail either.
I think we can all appreciate that, but let's just move along with the presentation, and I think we should work diligently to get back to the conversation to dig into some of this.
Yeah.
I really do, because it's, you know, what's changing is our closure. all the
14
time.
years.
And we're talking about maybe pushing that out even further.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I think it's got to come with more work, you know, so,
Well, and-
but all good questions. though.
To answer your question about, okay, so now we have this extended timeline, how does that change the way that we're managing the bonds? Because
Right,
independent of what else we were talking about. If you look on page 6, you can see that the majority of the yield that's currently available on the yield curve is within the first 5 years. That's not going to stay the same forever, but there's really not a lot of yield pickup. There's no yield pickup actually if we go further out. So as opposed to getting, you know, an almost 5%, 4.5% yield, by holding it for 3 to 4 years, if we buy a 10-year yield, we're getting 3.92%. So that's another part of our strategy is, do we go long, knowing that the liability is longer in nature, or do we manage by what the yield curve is giving us, and then also anticipating how that might change in the future? So currently, it makes sense for us to be more closer to the yield, you know, the front of the yield curve. So,
So 2 questions. When was this fund originated? When did the board vote?
2019, I think.
we should send, maybe if you could send the version of the investment policy statement that you guys have on file.
Yeah, I
to-
know,
I should have
That'd be great.
thought to.
I got it here.
I mean,
May 1st, 2019.
And have you ever seen treasury yields of this magnitude before?
You mean this high currently, or?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we're higher than we were, but we're lower than history. So back in 1980, treasury yields were like 15%.
Oh my God.
Well,
Yeah, so that was when we had runaway inflation, we had the oil embargo. It was a much smaller economy at the time, so you had things like oil scarcity really driving up the price of everything. And so in 1980, the Federal Reserve under Chairman Volcker came in and basically raised rates until 50 or 18%, I think was where they got to the high, in order to kill that inflation, because inflation was running well into the double digits and having a serious impact on the economy. Basically, from that level, 1981, I wish I had that chart with me, but from 1981 rates have done nothing but go down. So that's been a really beneficial, generally beneficial for bondholders because the price of their bonds go up. You know, if you bought a long-term bond in 1981, you had a great cash flow over that time frame. But as the yields have gone down, that's become much harder for people to save accounts like this, where you're basically just saving money at the risk-free rate until we got to the very bottom, which was COVID, and even before COVID, where we had rates that were basically zero. So where do we think rates go from here? There's not a lot to really think that rates are going to run all the way up to that level. Certainly not. But we are dealing with 40-year high inflation. And we're not used to this level of inflation because after the financial crisis, we had anemic economic growth and we had incredible globalization. And then we had disruptive technologies taking the fore, like Uber, Airbnb. I mean, all of these things that sort of disintermediated the process and lowered prices overall, these deflationary forces. We're in a position now where we're not as globalized. So people are looking at, because of the pandemic, exposing these supply chain issues. Everybody's looking at onshoring labor, onshoring manufacturing. If we do that in America, that comes at a higher cost, because if we were exporting those labor costs to Vietnam or China, that's a much lower cost level. So I think going forward, we're probably going to be looking at 3 to 4% inflation as sort of the norm, at least, you know, for the next few years, which, by the way, was the norm back in the 90s. When I was learning this in college, our assumption rate for inflation was 3 to 3.5%. It's been 1.5% for the decade between the financial crisis to the pandemic. So if that answers your question, we're at the high side of where we've been, and things have changed. So bonds have gone continually down, but now they're going up a little bit. So the trend has changed, but I don't think we're going to see, you know, 7% yields on treasuries anytime soon.
I mean, it seems like if we truly feel like we're not going to close a landfill in 10 years, then having some 10-year treasury bonds at 3.92 seems wise. But
That does. And what treasury bonds at 3.92% protect you from is inflation, or not inflation, I'm sorry, recession. So if we get into a recession, the 3.92% 10-year treasury looks good over that recessionary period when the front end of the yield curve actually comes down a lot.
Yeah.
The problem with the 3.92% treasury currently is that inflation is running at 5%. And if it runs at 5% for any extended period of time, you're basically underwater in that position. Right? So trying to maximize that too. But that's an excellent point. And that's when 10-year treasuries become attractive and become a hedge against slowdown in growth, because the 10-year treasury is really reflecting where we think growth is going to take place over the longer term. Whereas the front end of the yield curve is really reflecting what we think the Federal Reserve is going to do with their policy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And corporate bonds in the future, I mean, you said they're marginally higher right now than treasuries, but where do you see those going in relation to treasuries? So that's another great question. We're getting into a period where the economy is slowing. We have a better average chance of developing some sort of recession within the next year. Is it going to be a recession like the Great Recession? I don't think so, because we still currently have 2 available jobs for every unemployed person. You don't see that kind of pre-recessionary environment typically. We don't have a lot of speculation. Bitcoin kind of ran its course. It dropped 75% last year. We don't have a lot of hot technology stocks. We do have some at the margins. Tesla's also sold off quite a bit. The reason I bring that up is we don't have that speculative bubble that needs to be rebalanced. So if we do get a recession, that's when we'll start to see the spread, which is the premium that you get for lending to a corporation as opposed to the government, start to widen. And so the decision point for us as a committee at that point is,
do we feel that that spread is wide enough to take that risk? So when you're investing in an A-rated company, the probability of default is low, but it's not zero. When you're investing in a US Treasury, the default rate is effectively zero, because at the end of the day, the US government can print money if they have to pay you off. That's the difference. So those are things that we're looking at. We're not looking at corporate bonds yet, just because those spreads are so tight, you're not being compensated for that differential. You are being compensated for the differential with a CD. And the benefit to that is that you do have that FDIC insurance. So you are actually getting a premium that's substantial in this market.
How long are CD rates?
CDs are 4.75 to about 5%, and the duration or the maturity that we're looking at for CDs is 2 to 3 years.
Okay, they don't go like 5-10 years?
They do have 5-year CDs, but it's a depository. It's basically an extension of a bank's deposit. So it's typically a lower, it's a shorter maturity, because deposits are shorter term in nature.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Karen.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if we invest, we technically, the $100,000 we put away for the closure fund every year, we're giving to you for this fund. So can it be directed, you know, do you think it would be smart to have somebody direct it to say, well, we want to buy CDs? I mean, I know the bonds are moving and they're gonna come to term and all that, and you'll reinvest, but is there ability to direct the money that's going in new to a vehicle that you think is more stable and possibly earning more?
So we're what's called a discretionary money manager. So this investment policy statement, which is kind of the agreement between your organization and us, is that we have an understanding of what you're trying to do. And you're saying to Patrick, given the tools that you have available, make the best decision on our behalf that will maximize the yield that we're going to get at the least amount of risk within the parameters that we've set.
And then that gives us the ability to act on that quickly as we see fit. I was a broker when I started. It was commission-based structure, you know, basically you had to call each client to tell them, we want to buy this thing and get their permission. And it's a very cumbersome process. You know, again, we have this mechanism in place. We have a number of CFAs on staff. We'd certainly be more than willing to answer any questions that you have and go over any of our investment choices, or if you have something you want to bring to the table. But I think the discretionary aspect of how we manage money is effective in this regard, leveraging our expertise.
Because literally just in the past couple of weeks, like short-term treasuries were up to like 5%. And then that thing happened with SVB and they just, whoosh, you know, and so if, you know, Patrick can pivot because he's seeing things that he can act. Whereas if he has to reach it because he knows.
I was just thinking in terms, like if you have a 2 to 3 year term on the money and new money's coming in, then you're gonna choose the best vehicle when it shows up.
Correct.
Yes.
And so
exactly,
whether
exactly.
that's,
I mean, that makes sense. I'm just wondering if you need a
at that
direction to say
moment,
we're willing to do CD or something.
whether at that moment it's the CD or a treasury,
Corporate bonds,
Corporate
like you were
bonds.
saying. Yeah, yeah.
or that you guys maybe have a project where you might need the funds, we might
Yep.
just even leave it in cash. That's why we like to have these meetings with you, because we need to know if you do have any cash
Exactly.
needs that are coming up. So Patrick might leave money in cash rather than reinvesting a treasury that matures. So we really do welcome these conversations to understand what you're grappling with, so we can serve you better.
We're grappling with garbage.
Which is exactly the
Lots
case
of
with the well, you know, for
Yeah,
instance,
right.
that was, and
Right.
when we looking at the possible funding sources for the kind of semi-emergency well repairs, that it worked out really well when we were setting the budget and we were like, well, we don't really feel comfortable drawing down the unassigned fund balance any more than it already is, even to pay for this, $120,000 expense, even if we are gonna get repaid by the DEP eventually. It didn't work out. They were really quick in responding and saying, oh, well, we actually have this amount in cash, and so you are keeping that aside right now anyway, right? Or something else is coming due around the same.
Something's coming
Yeah,
due.
there's a couple of bonds, one matures in May and one in June, I think.
I think you needed it by November or something like that.
Well, it's a little bit of a moving target, but I think it'll be the first time that we're actually requesting money from you.
Because
So
the last time we had a conversation, you were like unsure whether you're gonna.
when we were gonna need it exactly, and that's still the case, and it's good that we're reviewing the corporate authorization form and stuff, because you're eventually gonna be getting a request to, instead of us just sending money over there, we're gonna need some of that you have sitting over there, so.
Yeah, so there's currently 93,000 in cash on hand. There's a bond maturing in June for $100,000. There's a bond maturing in September for $40,000. And there's a bond maturing at the end of May for another $100,000.
May 23 or
May 31st.
20.
Oh, I'm sorry, 23. Yep, this year. Yeah.
So plenty of cash will be.
Yeah.
So just let us know definitively.
Well, hopefully we don't have to spend too much cash. That's what we don't. Want to save it.
No, but we are, the well,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
unless that magically solves itself, I don't know,
No,
have you figured out another solution?
no.
So we need to finalize our adjustment of our list of take instruction from people for the Camden National Wealth Management Group. So unless there's anything else,
No, I'm done.
okay, I think we should finalize that.
Is there specific language that you'd like to see us have in our motion here?
Just that you, because it just says, I hereby certified that I am the duly elected qualified. Luckily, she's here. She's the secretary. And that Midco Solid Waste had a board meeting and resolved that, can you tell us that we
Oh,
can.
right, so the secretary, I remember
Yeah,
this one
that's-
before, we had the secretary. who
There's
is-
an officer that's the secretary.
Who's our secretary?
So it would be all of the same people.
Her and
So
it-
there, so the
Sure.
secretary is going to be signing this form, not her, I guess.
Right, yeah, she's our
Sounds like
assistant, like
David.
on the staff.
Oh,
level.
the
We have a
secretary of the
board.
board.
It was David Barrows, I think, that signed it before.
Who's the-
Who, I'm forgetting who our
Who did-
secretary,
I'm not sure.
Thought it was you.
Hey,
I thought you, for a while you held two positions.
me?
Yeah. I thought
Yeah,
it
you
was
did.
You are.
It's on the website.
Allison, I can't possibly do anymore.
Never say
To be
that.
honest,
Did-
our
did-
form has not been formalized, so.
So did, Beth, do you know who the acting secretary is? Or,
I don't
Oh,
know.
is it Deb?
I thought it was Deb.
It might have been.
I thought that we relieved,
Yeah,
I thought
actually,
you
it might
took it
have
I
on.
thought it was
Temporary.
right.
I thought he took no part.
I know that you had it, but I did feel that we relieved you of it at some point.
No, I think he's right, though. I think it was.
I've been relieved. A lot of things.
So are you or aren't you? Is this?
I would move that we amend the agenda to
There we go.
add
Appoint
the
secretary.
appointment of secretary for the corporation, and that
I have to-
I nominate. Or do we need to do that two separate motions?
We gotta do this first.
I was gonna amend the agenda and to appoint a secretary, and then I was gonna nominate. So I would move that we need 2/3 in order to amend the agenda, right? So I move that we amend the agenda to add appointment of secretary.
Anybody?
Second.
Okay. Moved, and there's been a motion and seconded to amend the agenda to appoint a secretary for the Solid Waste Board of Directors.
I think we have. Wait 1 minute.
Is there,
Well, So same.
Yeah, I think it was. So. Is there any questions, any concerns, any communication about that amendment to the agenda? Okay, we're all good with that. All those in favor of amending the agenda? Motion passes.
I move that we appoint Eric Boucher as secretary.
Is that how you say that name? Oh.
French version.
Okay, we've had a motion for Eric to be the new secretary of Midco Solid Waste. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Well, very,
Glad you're here.
No discussion. All those in favor?
I guess, does he accept it?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so we'll get back to the agenda. Agenda item.
So do we need two motions in order for, do you have two different categories? Or is it only one category that we're amending? So it's just the corporate authorization form?
Right, so who we're authorized to speak with, and we talked about it being Jody, Marlene, and David.
And removing Audra,
And
or we don't need to necessarily remove, and we just update it, so.
Updating our communication list.
So I move that we update our corporate authorization form on file with Camden National Wealth Management to designate Jody Hanson, Marlene Libby, and Dave St. Laurent. Did you need the titles also?
I've written them.
Okay, good. Then I guess that's my whole motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the board. Do I hear a second? Second it. Okay, seconded by Mike Brown. Is there any discussion on the changes and the motion of the representatives for the board to give Camden National Wealth Management direction? No? Okay, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes.
So does that require all three people to be involved in the decision when the decision?
That is if there are any limitations. If not, we
Yeah.
can speak to just one.
Just one person can give instruction to move things around. And you guys, is that you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else that your group needs from us?
So I need to get Eric to sign, I need to get you to sign.
Mhm.
So if you would sign here, David. And actually, how many of the drivers? They're gonna have to do.
Nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do.
That's what they're doing. You have your driver's license, Phil? You don't, you're not signing, you're not.
I think that was getting done.
It's not on the list with that one, but
Deborah, no one has a secretary.
well, I think we had an influence. I think she did the interim thing there. with the passing of days. And I think you're right. I think.
I think you did that.
maybe it might have been you, but
It's actually.
It's possible. Working your way up to board chair by
Yeah,
taking
not
on two
working.
positions.
And-
He really proved it this year. He was vice chair and secretary, so I.
Oh, no. Yeah, yeah. If I don't, it's like.
I remember you well, Margo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Who does?
Me too. That's why.
Child of the enemy.
Somebody on your license plate.
I did.
Well, you have to the board.
There was all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it only get $5.
About before that, you can go to have one of the people in the left.
Next year.
Things about the actual meeting.
Well, you know, those same bylaws, so you have somebody elected.
We have to change the local agreement, but yeah, I think it should be 1 and 1, because like all this time when you weren't on the board, when you weren't on the select board, you still could have been, when nobody wanted to do it for Rockport.
I wasn't home. I was on there for years all by myself.
Right,
No one
right.
else
It's
joined.
not always a high interest.
All
area.
set?
Somebody wanted to.
Surprising.
Yes, the initial here. and
What do you mean?
that first.
Okay. Someday.
No, nobody's gonna do this. I think they just threw me back into it when I got back as a select board. Oh, you going back? I said, I am. No.
That's kind of how it's.
The signatures. were in the other-
No, I still, yeah.
Yep. going on. It's really frustrating when you
Oh,
get
yeah.
people that are like,
Yeah.
That's your.
Right.
Oh, fun. Didn't see her much, so why, I'm like Portland. We just got back home for us.
Where'd you go?
Just to the Dominican.
You know, I should send there's a link to the photos from.
Very-
It's how you read it.
Yep. Oh, you know, that, you know, we got that fellowship before that would work.
No, want a blue one?
Yeah,
If anybody sees that hearing goes kind of like this.
So.
On my way out. And on me, that's like fine.
That's a difference. It was a
Avoided me.
Yeah.
date of inception. Where if I was looking at this. I was just curious.
All right, so
Are we all set?
there's. Given those losses, it's down 48 basis points, so minus 0.48. But again, those losses.
When you see it back.
Yeah.
No.
Are you all set?
Because this person is not.
Mine.
Right, so it would either be. Him who's on, yeah, I don't think.
Keep thinking it's Audra and I keep on thinking she's not here.
Oh, no, I said Audrey.
I know.
We go have some discussion. Okay, if we are finished with that, and I just want to make sure that there's nothing else to present.
Not from our perspective, but like I said, we would love to have the opportunity to meet with you more regularly. Just to keep the
Like-
lines of communication open.
Quarterly.
That's
What
up
do
to you, whether it's twice a year or quarterly,
Couple times a
whatever.
year.
And especially with the markets being the way they are, I think it will help you folks if you ever get cornered at a cocktail party, you have a better understanding of what's going on.
that probably need to be, so the board schedule fluctuates a little bit, but we have been designating that to the finance committee. So
helpful.
I think every so often,
It is very helpful for the whole board to be
At
doing.
least once a year.
maybe if we do this once a year and then.
I think one's out, like after our
conservative
elections, I think it'll be, on a general basis, update, or if there's anything that changes. That way the new board, any new board members can get up to speed.
Just right there.
Right, we could do that, they could come every time we do the corporate authorization
Yeah,
update as.
so whether it's July or August,
You guys know.
whatever.
He is.
That
I'm saying.
way they know who's here and they. new people
I
know who
usually
they
go
are.
to 40 paper, but I think what time is it?
Mhm.
That sounds good.
It closes
shorter one.
fairly early.
Okay, so in disposing of that agenda item, we'll move on to the next one. Set effective start date for board approved MSW fee increases.
I think we're on fine.
MSW general, excuse me, MSW general legal counsel discussion. Cross that one off.
Just to take care of it.
Who should take the lead on that one? Is that Dave?
So,
Are they okay to?
Is it Ben?
can we depart?
You're all set.
We'd like to have you stay until the end.
We're trying to be polite.
Please be polite, stay.
He wants.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really helpful. Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack there.
What's that?
I didn't mean to get sidetracked there. What?
Okay, we're good. We got you real back in. We're good to go.
Take care.
Thank you. So the next agenda item, MCSWC General Legal Counsel Discussion.
So,
I mean, there was just, I know that Bob, we need to make a decision because, Paul's in his long retirement transition. I'm sure he's still willing to do a little bit here and there for us, but we talked about needing to come up with a succession plan. At one point, there was interest in doing a full RFP We did at one point do that thing where they helped us, some other firm helped us. But Bob, I think, I don't know much about this, maybe any more than anybody else, but I think he mentioned that he spoke with Bill Kelly. And he said did I understand that correctly? They'd be willing to do a few hours a week for us, not charging us?
Yeah.
I don't know what the basis
So-
of that is.
I talked to Bill, he said that he talked to Bill Kelly, Bill
Okay.
Kelly said he could help, you know, a few hours a week if needed.
Yeah.
And no, and then
Is that like, is that a conflict of interest thing?
well, that's up to you. I mean, that's why I'm letting you know. I mean,
I didn't know if it was legal because I know he's.
He's an attorney. I think he would know
Who's the attorney for?
for Camden, you know,
Yeah.
and for Hope, I
Oh,
believe.
yeah, so I thought he's always.
Wow.
Oh,
Well, so the thing is, I will say, the one time before, I was like all hot and fun, we gotta go way out and like this, and I did this in Camden too. I was like, you've been using the same person for so long and there are all these conflicts all over the place. And I was like, we can get somebody better. And then some more experienced people were like, oh, Allison, but you know, who do you think you're gonna get? Like, in terms of starting from scratch, it does seem like maybe we should have like a longer term plan, but maybe take him up on that, like being able to give us some advice maybe, or to tell us if it is, I mean, is it a conflict of interest that he represents Camden and Hope? It doesn't
Well,
seem to
what
be.
if we ask Paul?
And that's what I actually want to do.
Why don't we, and I'm just pitching this to the board, why don't we have a conversation with Paul about, look, thank you very much for your tireless work. Can you make a recommendation of a succession plan for us? Obviously, I don't think he's into it anymore, and like he was, and he can't be. So maybe he could shed some light on maybe a list, meaning 2 or 3 people who would be, I don't want to say adequate, would be competent in his mind. I mean, you know, before it gets to a point where we can't talk to Paul.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because there was a time when there was like this, like, oh, let's just, you know, start from scratch and not even consult with him.
He
And I
did,
really feel like you know, I disagree with him on a few things and whatever, but he does have, you know, he has had all of our files. I think he dropped off all the files, but he has that, you know, knowledge of kind of what we need. We do have the labor attorney that's separate.
I was gonna
and
say, I think it
I think-
really depends on the issue.
It does depend on the issue, and
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
didn't he recommend somebody for something we was doing that he didn't want to, or what was that,
Well, I
It
think,
was like a
I
Deb
thi-
Hall got.
if
wound up
maybe
about
if we could get some information out to
Yeah,
him
what it was
for, well, how often are we meeting here? That's kind of
Well, we
embarrassing.
could set another meeting in a month if
Okay.
we wanted to.
Well,
and
I think I think
You're
we
the
should
acting chair.
get some,
Right.
I think we should get some information out to our attorney, Paul Gibbons, and spell it right out to him, you know, hey,
And
you know,
thank him for.
yeah, we understand you're retiring, and we'd like to talk to you about a succession plan, and maybe talk to you about recommendations for proper legal representation, and leave it at that, and then we can let the conversation go as it does, and then move from there.
So invite him to our next.
Absolutely.
That's what I was
And we
gonna
can-
say, bring him to a meeting.
Yeah, absolutely, and if our meeting is gonna be too far out, maybe we schedule a meeting.
Is he physically able to come to meetings?
I
Well,
can
let's
answer
call,
that.
let's have Dave call
I
and,
know Paul very well.
yeah.
I worked with him for 30 years probably,
He can always zoom in.
on and off. Does anybody know where he's living now?
It wasn't that long
I
ago
think
that I
he's
talked
living
to
with
him.
his sister.
His office was out by, he was there
Maybe I
till,
can
think
stop by
maybe
the office
December,
to
I'm
find
not
out.
100% sure, but-
Yeah, I know where he worked.
Well, it's
I
just-
can, maybe I
Sent
can,
us over something. It wasn't so long ago that he sent
Let's
something.
let's
right?
see what our options are. I
Yeah, I
even,
know.
Said he was at that
even,
office.
even if you wanna talk to him, I think we should send him some communication as to what we're thinking. And then you can, you know, if you've got a decent relationship with him, then
always have
just
it.
kind of feel him out, see what's going on.
Would there be any value in giving him like some type of recognition for his service or
I
something.
certainly think that,
Certainly would.
I certainly think that wouldn't hurt, once he's told us,
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't
There's been a
know,
lot of work. over the
right,
years.
but I think he sounded like he was really dedicated to the facility and he did a lot of
It
work.
was.
I mean, what,
It was.
Help make the MRC. too.
Right.
Yeah,
so maybe some kind of some type of accommodation, whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah, there were a couple of things I ended up, I forget what it was. I was meeting with him about something else maybe a year ago, and we started talking about micro solid waste, and there were a few things that like he wanted that were, he had knowledge of that he wanted a few other people
Right,
to know. He
right.
had some old survey plans and stuff that he showed me, and he said, I've been wanting to be able to share this just so, there are like a few things from the past that some more people should know, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense, so.
I say we do this sooner than later, just have a sit down and talk to him about it.
Right, and he could probably
Nice.
advise
Jim's
us on
gonna
things
get
like
back with
conflict of
you.
interest.
Jim, well, I think we should do both. I think Jim's gonna just, on on the QT,
Yeah.
or no, maybe not on the QT, but on a personal note.
I'll go with the office where he used to work.
Yeah.
See if I can get his phone number,
Sure,
find out where he lived.
that'd be great. Appreciate that.
But didn't he just?
I have the same number. I think it was the same number.
So I know
It should be the same one on this list.
Mystery.
I think, his,
Something 88, isn't it?
I can't think of her name right
Oh,
236.
now. I think it's the same number that he had.
Okay.
Okay, so we're officially tasking Jim with reaching out.
Jim has volunteered to just have a personal conversation with him, which he'll get back to us, and if he doesn't, that's fine, but we're gonna send a note to him and tell him that we'd like to get together with him and talk about a succession plan.
Yep.
And we'll go from there.
So
See what his
Dave will reach out to
availability
them
is,
also,
or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
so,
Dave can write a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, whoever writes the letter.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll carry that on probably to the next meeting, and hopefully we can sit down sooner than later. Next agenda item, set effective start date for board approved MSW fee increases. My question is, did we outline what we wanted for a fee adjustment?
Yeah, it was in the minutes.
This last one,
It's
this one that we just approved,
the one we just approved. It's actually outlined in the minutes.
okay?
I believe it's
So I-
220.
requested this, because I think I wanted this to be on the agenda because while there, some of the incidental fees that have already gone into effect, there are a whole bunch of fees that we approved that have gone into effect, but historically, there's some more formality around the MSW and construction, sometimes also the construction debris fees. And the interlocal agreement outlines sort of when fees go into effect after votes. But it says that unless otherwise stated, they'll go into effect the day after the vote of the municipal officers. Will the vote of which municipal officers? Is it after the Midco Solid Waste Board votes? Is it after the select board vote? Is it, and so we had a conversation about this on the finance committee when we recommended the fee increases, and we took a look at the interlocal agreement and past practice. And, there are times when the board chair has gone around to all of the towns. That was when we did a fee increase at the same time as we were determining the next, the Eco Main Fiber Right Day. So it was a highly contentious time, but I think that as I actually wrote a little thing that I'm just gonna read here, but like as a board, we need to decide what we think needs to happen in terms of approval from our towns. David Kinney had written something to the finance committee a couple months ago that said, it was kind of like, we approved the board approved these fees. The budget is contingent upon, the fees too. So, what do we think we need to do next? I'd also had a lengthy conversation with John Duke before when we did the construction debris fees. And so kind of getting their different feelings, but I took some quotes out of the interlocal agreement and kind of gave like varying interpretations. And I think the board tonight can kind of decide which of those we want to adopt and pass along to our towns maybe, but so regarding the fees, we took a deep dive into this for landfill fees, which are subject to the same provision of the interlocal agreement. So the long answer is the quick answer is that we have decided previously that the responsibility lies with the directors from each town and not with the manager and board chair to keep the select boards apprised. So long answer is as follows. Our finance committee report from July 2022 advised the directors that both MSW fees and CDD fees must be reviewed by the municipal officers of all 4 towns. The way in which that review happens depends on the needs of that community. In years past, with high levels of strain, more review was requested. For the CDD changes this past round, when we talked about it, no director indicated opposition from their respective town officers. The interlocal agreement states that the appointed directors shall keep the municipal officers of their municipalities informed of the financial and technical condition of the solid waste disposal facility. The interlocal agreement also states that in order to defray the cost of maintaining the Midco solid waste facility and to defray the cost to comply with all laws and regulations pertaining to solid waste, the municipal officers of each member town shall jointly establish a user fee schedule and any regulations necessary to implement such fees that will result in a significant revenue source to help pay for costs associated with their operation maintenance, blah, blah, blah. The term municipal officers refers to the select boards of each town, whereas joint board or board of directors is the wording used to refer to the Midco Solid Waste Corporation board. When we changed the construction debris fees, we discussed that each of the directors was responsible for keeping their select boards apprised of what is going on. If one of the towns was uncomfortable having their appointed representatives make these decisions on the Midco Solid Waste Board, then those directors should either provide their town officers with more information or raise the flag to the Midco Solid Waste Board that there is opposition. The interlocal agreement does not touch the subject of what would happen if some of the select boards agreed to the change of fees and some don't. It says that we will jointly decide. The mechanism here for jointly deciding is often presumed to be the board of directors who are appointed by the municipal officers, and in most cases, also municipal officers ourselves. However, when it says the municipal officers of each member town shall jointly establish a user fee schedule and any regulations necessary, a conservative reading could demand that each minor fee change be reviewed by the entire membership of each select board in some kind of large joint meeting. The municipal officers of each of the towns are free to determine the way they are comfortable going about doing this. It does appear any of them would be well within their rights to say that they do not wish to delegate full responsibility to their appointed representatives. So in Camden, we reviewed both the CDD fees, and by reviewed, I mean not voted. We talked about it, and nobody. So in Camden, we reviewed the CDD fees and the MSW fees. I alerted them to the fact that they would sort of have the right to demand a vote if they wanted to. No objections were raised. We discussed in Camden that fee increases were likely in order to keep the assessments flat and that they would have the right to object to them if desired. There was no desire among the Camden board to take on this review themselves, as they preferred to continue the practice of participating via the directors they appointed. Most recently, we discussed the bag fees proposed at our Tuesday meeting the day before the Midco Solid Waste meeting. We invited any of them to attend if interested. It probably would have been wise to have this conversation again at our meeting of the board this past week to remind the Midco Solid Waste Corporation directors of the responsibility. I don't know that that conversation has gone on in the other towns. There is one part of the interlocal agreement that refers to a possible vote of the municipal officers. Again, a conservative reading could suggest that all 4 towns must vote on each individual fee increase, including miscellaneous items. Due to the fact that there are municipal officers of each of the 4 towns who are appointed as directors of Midco Solid Waste, whereas occasionally the number of appointed unelected members has been much higher. Like right now, I think we're all municipal officers, right? The reference to municipal officers seems to have been used more flexibly. I don't believe the select boards, for instance, have ever weighed in on mattress fees. So here's the language. This fee schedule can include a pay-as-you-throw program and the imposition of a per-ton fee for the disposal of solid waste delivered by commercial haulers to the solid waste facility in Rockford. The fee schedule can include all fees, blah, 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 blah. The fee structure can be changed annually by the municipal officers or sooner if circumstances require such a fee change. No fee change can occur without 30 days advance notice to the public by newspaper advertisement. Unless otherwise stated, all fees shall be implemented the day after the vote of municipal officers to approve and amend the fee schedule. So when you say that, even just there's a little bit of disagreement because the day after the vote of the municipal officers kind of implies that there's a day that the municipal officers vote. That's
four
all the
different days.
same day. So in this case, I think that like we should just clarify. So we voted on those fees. We didn't decide then when they were going to be implemented. I think the idea in our minds was that they were going to coincide with the budget year. But they don't necessarily have to. And then it's kind of for each of us to decide, should we go then back to, do we want to ratify this with each of the 4 towns in a formal vote? Or, and use, it might be a good communications opportunity too, to just say, this is, just so everybody knows, and then we could say that, the date it was gonna happen. That's sort of why I thought we should just have it on the agenda to talk about what should.
So it's written. It's confusing. It can be, and it's written in different places. It's written so that you could interpret it different ways. And then it's also used in, I think, one spot with both of those interpretations.
Right.
With the same word. And so I think we need to get that straightened out. I don't know how we're gonna do that. I would like to see us go back to our boards and get it voted on. Because that's how we interpret it.
Mhm.
I feel that's how we interpret it. But I think that's another thing that we need to work on through our committees to get rid of the, how do I say this, ambiguity
Language.
and get rid of the double play language. What do you think? I mean, we had that conversation earlier, but we got on to other things. I understand your position on that, but we got a document here on how we run our facility. It's confusing. And I think it's our job to straighten that out so that it's not, so that anybody can come in here and be a member and it's straight. You know what I mean?
I think if you have to look at it in different places and it's conflicting with each other, it would be good to have that cleared up.
Absolutely.
But I think that for the sake of the budget and what you've already done, there needs to be some decision on when you're gonna do the fee increases or if you're gonna do the fee increases.
Well, what is we can do the math on the date that we can have it start, because we've got what? It's, the select boards aren't on the same.
June 1 is when I was thinking,
When?
the date the budget starts.
June 1.
Yeah.
July 1.
Excuse me, July 1, June 30.
That's
I mean,
attainable,
So first,
don't you think?
Yes.
oh yeah, I mean, it should absolutely, but what do you think, Jim? Do you think like, I mean, I do think it's also possible that each town could decide separately that you want to vote or that you don't. I don't think it's Midco Solid Waste responsibility to force Hope to vote, for instance. If, that we go on with what we're doing, even if, but that we could sort of provide a model, like, just to say, for instance, we can't get this on the agenda in Camden. I don't believe that should be holding up what we're doing in, here, but that we should decide, it might make, well, if we go back, it should kind of just be to ratify it, like not saying this is open to a big discussion, but our budget, we'd like this to be ratified for the purpose sometimes of it's maybe just like the way that we sign the school budget warrant, like where we say, you can't, it's sort of the municipal officers just saying, we're aware of this. We agree with it, going out on the ballot so that nobody can say they didn't know. I don't really see the harm in having the towns.
Well, no, the problem is we've set our budget up on those increases.
Right,
Right, exactly.
So we need them.
exactly.
Right.
Oh, we gotta go back and
It
look at
has
the
to
budget.
happen.
You know.
Definitely has.
And the other thing is your costs, your disposal costs are going up, and that's part of the reason for the increase.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to do it unless you plan on not paying the people you bring the waste to.
I mean, the only reason not to do it would be if we think that in one of the towns, it's gonna create some big can of worms where,
I don't.
and
think it's
I
going
don't, I don't believe, in Camden, we did discuss it, and so I would be comfortable saying, you know, we want everybody to vote on it, but I would personally also be comfortable leaving it as we did, because but I think we should do what, you know, what makes everybody feel comfortable.
Well-
If there's trepidation in Lincolnville, then
I don't think there is in any of these towns, but I just think
cross it.
how we get to where we need to be. You know
Because
what I
we
mean?
didn't do it for the CDD, so the thing is, are we really
Why
gonna go
didn't we
back?
do it for the?
Because of the same philosophy,
But this is pay as you throw. This is.
it's any revenue stream that constitutes, you know, anything that, it says the fees can be changed annually, it doesn't say which fees, and it
And-
says, you know, subject to a vote of municipal officers. I feel that we've been operating in a way where the municipal officers, the way we jointly operate as municipalities, the towns are appointing, they've been appointing municipal officers. First of all, there was a time when it was like mostly just appointed people.
Yeah,
I know Camden isn't saying we want to be able to vote on this. So it would be to make us feel okay. The CD, if we were gonna do it for MSW though, there's nothing different about except for, I guess you could say that more people are impacted.
Yeah.
And so a lot more people are gonna be like, oh, the bags went up. So maybe we should just do it as a communications tool, but if we have you know, if they say no, then I don't know what we would.
Yeah, what happens if one town, I'm sorry,
yeah,
So I
I'm
think,
sorry, Dave.
I think all four towns should vote on this and we should work to amend the interlocal agreement and take out or change this language so it's very clear.
Yeah, it's just too vague. You know what I mean? And we need to, and I know we keep saying this, but we need to get to it. The governance committee needs to get back at this stuff.
Who's on that committee?
Yeah, well, that one too.
I mean, maybe sometimes we can also, like, for instance, this, I don't know, I don't think I'm on the governance committee, but like, there are certain tasks that could be just, like, I kind of love to, there are a few interlocal agreement things that I think I would love to, like, help with. I mean, I guess that's kind of stupid because anybody can go to the committee meetings if they want to, so it doesn't really matter, but
So I say we get this to the towns so that it can be voted on, so that we've got that confirmation. And then we get it out. It's gotta be out 30 days, but we might be able to get this done before July 1st.
well, that,
Yeah,
You're
we-
talking about select boards only, right?
What's that?
You
Yeah.
just say get
Oh,
it to
yeah.
the towns, so
Yeah.
I just wanna, it's select
so
boards.
that was, can I ask
Yeah.
clarification?
Sure.
So it's not a town like.
Right.
No.
Okay, all right, yeah, I'm like,
Just
whoa,
elected
whoa,
municipal-
this could be.
No, it should like. Well,
I was thinking, oh,
Yeah, it should, and there should not be any problem getting this on our next agenda.
And
yeah,
then,
that makes sense.
and then 30 days before July 1st, we
that might be.
issue a notice.
I don't know,
Correct.
but I'm sure it's not.
On.
And you can confirm contract.
I don't have control over the agenda, Karen.
I think if we can get all the four towns.
Yeah.
Get it on their next agenda, then after we all confirm that the select boards have all said yes. Then we just put the notice out to do it.
Raise it before the end of the year. We could use the money.
Yeah, because,
Well, but there has to be a 30-day.
yeah, we can, that's what I'm saying.
Just not to get it out as soon as possible.
Yeah, as soon, our meeting's on the 13th. So if everyone else is around the same time, so I mean, effectively, we should be able to all say by May 1, so we can issue the notice on May 1 and make it effective June 1.
Yeah.
I don't see why not. I mean,
Absolutely.
it makes the most sense. I mean, as it is, the budget's like that tight coming into this year, so, there's no point in starting behind the ball if we can be a month ahead of it.
I like that.
Yeah, no,
So-
it just makes sense.
When you did the budget, you said it was effective for the fiscal year 24 budget.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we did it as two separate, motions.
And that the hauling would be, tightened up.
So we,
We can make it.
Well, we can review and see what
Yeah,
that
we
looks
need to
like.
have
I mean, we can pick that up at next month.
So we need to have two motions. We need to have the motion to send and is that gonna come from her or you to the towns?
I don't, so this is where, sorry.
Yeah.
I think that that this shouldn't be something that is like from Midco Solid Waste staff, that it should really be like that. That's the responsibility of the municipal officers. I think that to go back to our towns and to say what we need to do, rather than, like, in looking at making this job sustainable for somebody, it's, like when Jim had to go around to all the towns and be the one answering questions and all of that to each, it's enough of a trouble to be able to answer to this board. But then when you're kind of tasked with communicating with each of the 4 towns, I think that that we should be doing that, like taking on that role ourselves as going to our towns and saying, we need this on the agenda, not having them send it out, because we each kind of know the way it works to get.
We want it to say the same thing at each town.
Well, it's simply just what's it in the minutes, right, that we move to
Oh,
raise the small bag fee and all.
okay.
It's 3
Just-
things,
just that.
the small
Okay.
bit bag,
All right.
the large bag, and the per ton fee. That's all you really have to
All
say.
right,
You know, and it's already done
definitely
anyway.
can go back to our respective.
Just because it works a little differently in each town, kind of how you get things on the agenda, and I remember seeing Jim just go around and around with like, you know what I mean? Like getting things on it's,
Wednesday. Let's get it.
yeah, it sounds like it's probably not gonna be, see, Dave Kenny's gonna know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
He's not gonna need to ask any questions, so it'll be, but in some of these other towns, it's like,
Well,
I'm doing it right now.
there it is, right there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing it right
Okay.
now, so.
So what do we need to set tonight? What do we need to vote on tonight?
Just that we notify them.
Each representative is gonna notify.
I mean,
them.
really, we don't need.
We don't need to,
I don't
we don't,
think
we don't need to vote to notify the town.
No,
So it should be on our next meeting agenda to,
If you want to raise May, you have
To
to.
set an implementation date, or,
to give the results of
yeah, okay, we'll have an update on it and so once all 4 of the boards report back to the chair that it's been approved, then the 30-day, wait, report to me.
okay.
I'm the one that's.
May 24th.
Bert started this whole thing, so he can finish it.
So May 24th, the next meeting, so you're gonna have a July 1st start.
Yeah, that'd be great.
June first.
Jonathan.
You're
Okay.
not gonna have 30-day notice if you wait.
Yeah, we gotta have a 30-day notice.
The 30-day notice could go out now. It could have gone out. I mean, it actually really went out when we put it on when we voted on it at our Midco Solid Waste.
What was it
Board.
advertised in newspapers?
And what, isn't that the cart before the horse and then you?
Yeah,
meeting?
we gotta know about the vote first and then we'll put it out.
Well, no, it's supposed to happen immediately after the vote if you look at the interlocal agreement, it's on the day after the vote.
Unless otherwise stated, and we're gonna otherwise state.
Yeah.
And they're saying no change of fee, so it actually kind of makes it seem like you're supposed to notice 30, you're supposed to give a notice.
So the fee change cannot, oh, I see what you're saying. You can put it out 60 days before. the
Like some
vote.
people want the notice, typically you would put a notice out like before the board votes on something, so that people can, give input. But it's just one of those gray areas. I think what you're saying is good, that we can.
Well,
as
this
soon as-
time we've got.
Do you
time
usually
to
have
Start it.
like a leeway thing with contractors and stuff that are coming in, like? I mean, how does that work? I suppose most of them charge, so I'm just part of somebody pulls up the gate saying, what the hell?
Well, I see this
Right, they-
as,
yeah.
No notification ahead of time.
I see this as being in local media and also probably a sign over to Midco's.
We can update the
Yeah.
fee increase sign right up front.
Yep.
That's how it usually
We have to
works.
change it anyway, because we have to add one more thing in there that we.
We
that
also
we
usually do a
update.
handout, we put on
Yeah.
Facebook, we put
Yeah.
on our website, and we put it in the paper.
Okay,
So I'm confused. So we had originally thought June 1st was an excellent idea, and that would give us 30 days, 30 days to do this. Could we go on the assumption that all 4 towns will vote on it in the next 2 to 3 weeks?
I think we can.
instead of
Else
have a
have
meeting
trouble
date.
getting stuff on the agenda.
I just don't like to make promises, you know, but
I agree with that.
and if not, you know, go on without Camden. But
Okay, I think,
Can't you just like notify us of the results as the board chair of the results? We don't
Yeah.
have to have a meeting for that, do we?
No.
I don't think so. So
I don't- it doesn't, I don't think we do.
as long as we all vote on it by May first,
Right,
then we can advertise May first and then
Right.
June first.
right. And then we save a little,
so
we
we,
start a little.
yeah, we could vote to advertise it May 1st, subject to the, you know,
Subject to the vote.
affirmative
There you
votes of the
Okay.
four towns.
That's what we should do.
Do you want to make that motion?
Is that for implementation of
Jim,
June 1st?
we gotta wait for Jim.
I have a question. So.
Yeah.
How do you deal with people hoarding bags, let's say, or has that ever been an issue?
It's gonna be an issue.
That's why you
Yeah.
don't want to tell them
I'm gonna
to
do
do it ahead of time.
Do what, hoarding bag?
Yeah, so people say, oh,
From way back 10 years ago.
I mean, if you start adding it all up, it's not a lot of money, but I mean, people would probably go. Oh, well, that's what my question, is that something that is okay?
I think I wouldn't.
We
think-
just deal with it, we just accept it.
That just happens.
I
We
mean, I'm
also have to
just
tell the
curious.
vendors, because they have to change their two code, you know, the codes.
Mhm.
It is a process for Hannaford.
Oh, I
to
bet.
Get it done.
Yeah.
Right, that's why they want notice. Yeah, yeah.
But no,
Good
people will hoard the bag. They will come in and buy.
Yeah.
I want 4 cases of bags, you know, I mean, yeah.
Josh, don't do it.
He's gonna do it.
He's got a new kid.
No advocating for it, Josh. I can see it looking dry.
Other than our.
It's time to see the
It's like
taxpayers.
insider trading, you guys, we all have insider.
Don't let him try to fool you. He's a family man now. He's.
It can impact, our
Large
cy-
and small, we can do it.
it can impact our cycle of how
Okay,
many
so-
bags we have in storage and all of that.
So Jim's back.
We'll have to do an image.
I move that we advertise the change in the increase in MSW fees on May 1st for a June 1st implementation date, subject to the positive votes of all four towns,
With the member towns.
of
Yeah,
the member towns.
there's a motion on the floor.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any discussion, any questions? Everybody's good with that? Okay, we'll go to vote. All those in favor?
Did we second? Somebody seconded.
I think we did.
Josh did.
I don't know if I want, this is all.
Is there an actual-
It'll be like an Allison and Josh conspiracy.
Do you mind if I say all four towns
Yeah,
select?
it's in the.
Oh, maybe I
it's
should
in
say the select board.
Minutes that we,
This one?
All right. No, that's fine, just as long as I get something to show.
yeah,
you
So
know,
we don't make
go
you
to
too
the
scared.
meeting, see what-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dave St. Laurent come right to your meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, right here.
I'll call it. I'll call it.
2 hours notice.
So what outfit do I use for the
It
blocking?
does not matter. Does not matter. Okay, that wasn't bad.
That didn't take very long.
So the next item on the agenda are the financials. Beth, do you have anything that is glaringly obvious that you're not happy with on that?
No, actually just cleared up a long-standing overdue that made me
Okay.
happy and, got it straightened out.
Perfect.
And then, the report looks a little different because Vinny helped reprint it with Dave.
We,
So it
we,
might look a little different, but it's all the same information in the totals that you would normally see in a straight.
Oh, yeah, you mean the monthly stuff?
Uh-huh,
Is that their fault?
no,
are you talking the revenue side?
At first I was upset by it, and I'm like,
I got that, no, I got that from, no, got from Marlene. That's why it's different.
yeah, so, but it's all the same info, it just looks a little different.
Yeah, it's just broken down by the month instead of,
I
Dave,
think
is
we're
there
in good shape.
anything?
I think we're, considering everything, we're not doing bad, I don't think.
Pretty good shape.
Yeah,
Looks good.
yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
I want to also say that Beth and Vinny have been doing a great job. Beth has been working extremely hard on the safety, updating the safety plans, and Vinny's doing a good job with operations, so that whole thing is working really well. Yeah, perfect.
Also on the AR aging, you'll see the Z accounts at the bottom.
Yeah, what's
They're
that?
those old ones that we used to have,
Yeah.
that when we used to do, some, keep track of stuff coming in that was, from towns, but, That just stayed in there, and usually I take that out, be like, people see that in the auditors, because it's not real money. We do not, you reduce the total by those last 5 figures, 6 figures, you'll see that we're in better shape than it looks.
The only other thing that I noticed was some housekeeping on the spreadsheet was we don't haul the EcoMain and we don't go to EcoMain anymore. We probably ought to fix that.
Straighten that out.
Yeah.
There's this thing where they get really resistant every time we ask them to change the name of a.
I think it has to
Of a
stay on
line.
for 5 years. It's 5 years.
It's only 5 years though, because that's how many columns were in our spreadsheet. It makes no sense when you dig in. I wanted that to be changed too, and they don't, because it's like, that's what it used to be called, so that's
You can
what,
just say hauling and tipping. It doesn't have to say.
why don't you have that?
The
You'd be the
name,
perfect person to make that case, because I'm
Yeah.
not doing
There
it.
you go.
Yep,
Because then
Is there-
whoever it is, it doesn't change, you know what I mean? It's hauling and tipping.
You have to convince Jody, not us.
kind of the trio.
Before we call this a meeting, is there anything else anybody has? We.
Yes.
in good shape? Oh, gee.
I just want to talk about, when are we gonna meet again? I guess I said that last time too, but,
Yeah, Bob wouldn't answer you.
do we want to
We
meet
have too
next
many
month? Do we
meetings.
want to meet in 2 months?
We have too many meetings.
We're gonna, well, we guess we're gonna just inform if the town's doing all, we don't need to have a meeting.
I don't think we
Not on
need to
that.
have a meeting for that. I think we can definitely, inform and can
I
reach
don't know,
out.
I'm
can
fine with
reach
the
out
once
to
a
me.
month thing, I don't know what happened, why we, what happened, why we got so deterred away from it, but.
Oh,
Well, I really feel that we need to get back to having committees, because the committees will run the place for us. I feel, and with a reduced board.
So you want to have one or the other, right? You don't want to beef up.
No, I don't want to have one or the other. We need both. But
Oh,
what I'm
okay.
saying is if we don't want to have so many meetings, I think we could have board meetings every other month,
That's kind of what I
or
was.
something like
That's what
that.
I'm
So if we want to go with, if we don't have anything pressing and or emergency stuff, then maybe our next meeting should be in May.
That's,
I mean, I just feel like for the best of intentions with the committees, it doesn't always happen. And that there are enough, that works great when the board is all sort of apprised of the major things,
Yep.
but that we should identify, like the board should identify things that they want to task committees with, and things that the board wants to go over ourselves. To me, I think we could do something like every other meeting where there's like a formal meeting where we vote on things and we do business stuff. And then the next month could be more of a workshop meeting where we take up it's not the end of the world if one board member that doesn't want, be here, can't be here, isn't here. But like for instance, the leachate would be like a whole big topic that we could have the geologists come in and talk about what they've done over the years, talk about, oh, the gut project, the thing you invested $700,000 in to keep, more water from getting in the landfill. How's that going? What's we could have things like that just the board could talk about, and then we could decide there what we want to assign to the committees. Because at this point, it seems like a lot of the issues that come up are general interest to a lot of board members. Like we're having arguments about like who wants to be on the strategic capital planning committee. Seems like everybody kind of wants to do that because a lot of us are interested in those items. So maybe we should talk about some of this stuff as a whole board and then.
So the reoccurring topic is committees. We gotta get these committees, we gotta get enough people on the committees, this. So why don't we schedule a board meeting for next month with a focus on committee assignment and agenda items for the committees.
Yeah, then you could probably,
You know what I mean? And we can, and plan it.
well, I think maybe scheduling your committee
Not
meetings so that they're kind of set and on a
Yes,
certain
yes,
date.
absolutely.
Because then you'll know that, all right, I got a committee meeting, I gotta get because sometimes that motivates you to do the work you need.
Yeah.
It's just so hard because the board changes so much and then you get it just
In the committees.
doesn't change. I mean, we do
Well,
have some
but
things like
if
the
we
auditor. So the auditor and the hydrogeologist are things that are just like basic things that the whole board should hear. So I don't know if we need to have a meeting about committee meetings until we have a meeting, like, when was the last time the auditor presented to the whole board?
We want to bring the auditor in, we should bring the geologist in, I could bring Rich Fortin in to talk about the well, I mean, there's those things that you guys, it's good to know, when you have to explain to your constituents what's going on.
I feel that this next meeting, we should focus on committee and members. And then what else did we just say?
Set a calendar.
I mean, I just
Set
feel
a
like,
calendar for the committees, and then once we get the calendar for the committees etched in stone, then we can say, okay,
This is where we want to talk about this.
exactly, and then we can also look at board meetings.
Right.
What do we want to do?
I just disagree with that, because I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but sometimes we don't know what we want each committee to talk about unless maybe there are a few things that we could assign to committees right off, but I think sometimes we need to know more before we can like assign something to just a committee, because then it comes back, it just depends on what the level of interest is on a certain topic from the whole board. And that we should check off some of these things that we know. I mean, maybe not everybody wants to be as involved as I do, so maybe that's not but I'm sensing, like, from the comments I've heard from Jim, some of the past, like there's a lot of interest, for example, in just like the landfill leachate and figuring out the long-term plan for that. Like, I'd rather see us trying to go through some of the major topics as a board, so we're all working with the same information for a little bit.
I agree with Steve. You guys have a committee.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna have to have committees.
One of the-
And now we don't
there's-
have.
There's two,
Well,
well,
we
there's
do. I mean, my
actually
committee,
three.
I have a committee
There's
and
actually
I meet,
three.
like, so this whole
Well, yeah,
thing
but
about like.
why
the
doesn't
committees-
everybody else have one then?
So I'm just saying, I have tried to do that, like,
But
we
during
do
tax
that,
season, yeah.
but
Oh.
it's
We
not
do
really
that.
working
Yeah,
out that
there's
much. I have tried very hard. I've been the finance
I
committee for a
have
long
no idea
time.
what
I
the
have
hell I'm.
pages
Nobody's
and
ever
pages
told
of
me.
minutes and things like that, but it,
Did you just,
I mean,
John.
it's,
We've got
And
three
make sure you
committees,
guys were on
the capital strategic
Yeah,
and
almost a year ago.
strategic,
Before.
that, what's
Right,
that?
you
It's
want.
board committee.
Personnel committee.
Oh,
Yeah, we have
so that's
personnel.
four, yeah, the personnel committee.
the personnel committee has some actual
And
things they
finance.
could do that we already know.
Yeah,
I
we
haven't been
just
able
need to
to
get on the ball and get out of
finalize
tax
the
season.
information because it just hasn't gotten done. So
Yeah, that's-
wouldn't
I
it
think we
make
need
sense to have a meeting to discuss what we think is the priorities for the facility? And then those will generate tasks that the committees would work on.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I think
It
that should be
would.
the first step, because
It would.
I don't think everybody knows probably what the most important, I mean, we have to put them all up on the whiteboard, let's say.
Yeah.
goals were.
And we say, all right, which one of these things is most important? And then maybe narrow it down, because if you start focusing on all these different things, you're just not gonna be able to do it all.
And I think what's so important is we do that and then we go around the table and say, who is interested in working on this versus like, sorry, you're on this committee. Or sorry, you're not on this committee. I think it makes sense that it should be interest based.
So thinking about that, that's it, that is a really good idea to get the most important, next important,
So from
and
a
then-
manager level, I can tell you, here's the things I think are important.
Correct.
And then you guys, and then you're like, well, why? And then it's because of this, it's because of
Okay.
that. And then you guys decide, all right, these are the 4 things we want to focus on.
Yeah.
So I think, so let's rethink this next meeting. I think it ought to happen next month. I think there should be an outline from.
I can
from
put
the
together
current
a
manager.
big, high level
Yep.
kind of
It's
ideas.
not at the high level, so just.
It's goals.
I'll admit that.
We used to do that.
Jesus,
Like,
The last one
you
I
know what I mean? Do that.
I mean, I got 10 rattling off my head and I'm not even thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Okay, so that would be our focus for the next meeting. That,
Is it a workshop?
I most likely, yeah.
I don't know, that's why they call it a SWOT. I mean, it's really an evaluation of looking at the
Yeah.
future things we need to work on.
Like a goals workshop, I mean,
Good.
It really should be one.
and then, and then committees.
Yeah, and then every year you go over it.
So
You
at
adjust it.
this time, I'll entertain a final motion. I know we're missing a member.
Do you, what, do we want to set a date? Do we already know?
Yes.
Do we already know that?
So we're gonna go 2 months for the next meeting?
No, we're having.
Just trying.
Well, you said 2
I
months.
thought Bob was ready to want to be.
No,
Jill.
no, it's.
Okay, so I'll entertain a final motion.
Do we know when? No, I just, so.
April 26th.
Okay.
26.
Right? Wednesday, April 26th. That's the fourth Wednesday of next
Okay.
month. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm back.
April 26th.
It's your birthday?
Yeah, 26.
I won't be here.
Oh, really?
I'm out of town.
You probably scheduled all that around to make this something like meeting schedule, didn't you? Don't, we can totally zoom you in. Am I?
I'll be in, technically, I'm supposed to be in France. Now that day I will actually.
I can't
be in
remember what
Mexico.
day you.
Can I get back?
If they actually go.
I kind of want you to be here for our goal workshop.
Get stuff out. Wednesday.
Well, you can submit some goals.
Yeah.
I talked to Dave or
And
something.
then we'll
Are we
assign.
good?
Yeah, 8:40.
Huh?
I just need, and then I'm.
Okay,
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
All right, now let's.
I didn't know.